What is up, everyone? Crunchy Frog here, and yet another COD has found its way to Game Pass. This time it's 2017's Call of Duty World War II, and once again it dropped, I believe, on June 30th. So basically, whenever this came out, I told myself that I would download it and use this as an opportunity to play an older Call of Duty game that maybe I couldn't have otherwise played because of server count, stuff like that. I still owned the game, I think technically, in my stack of games on the TV stand, but I knew that with this coming to Game Pass, that would open the door to thousands, if not millions, of players that could potentially hop back on to populate the servers. So today I wanted to compare and contrast kind of World War II from the modern COD era to see what the old games like this one, kind of compared and how they stacked up against the newer CODs. I know we've done this before with kind of the golden age of CODs, which obviously has been done to death, right? Everyone loved the original Black Ops or the original Modern Warfare 2 or Black Ops 2, right? But it's rare that we get to see kind of this middle age of Call of Duty right after people were super mad about Infinite Warfare and games like that. It's kind of a not very often thought about era for Call of Duty, so I wanted to go back, see how it stacks up against the latest games like Black Ops 6 and Modern Warfare 3. So with that all out of the way, make sure to leave a like if you guys enjoy this video, as it helps others find the channel. If you'd like to see more Call of Duty content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And as always, if you would like to see videos up to an entire day early, make sure to hit that join button to become a channel member today. So with that all done, let's get right into it. And the first category that I kind of wanted to go over here is just the overall gameplay feel. How does the game feel to play? And the first thing I want to say is it feels so much slower than what we're used to with Black Ops 6. I've been playing Verdansk and Warzone the last couple of weeks with some friends, and so jumping into this, it was just a huge difference. Now obviously a lot of that could be the fact that you're working with World War II tech, and they purposely tried to make it a little bit slower. There's no advanced movement, and they tried to slow down the running in general to once again ground it, make it a little more realistic. There's also, I noticed, a much higher sprint out time, which is the time from whenever you're done sprinting or running, right, you can pull up your gun and physically fire a bullet at someone. So it kind of lends itself to encouraging camping, or at least a much slower, methodical play style than we're used to with the very heavily running gun, sliding around gameplay that we're used to with Black Ops 6. And I saw so much more camping. As a matter of fact, you'll probably even see in some of the gameplay behind, I just ended up starting kind of patrolling or camping myself just because it was so much more advantageous than it would be in a modern Call of Duty game. So I just kind of had to, win in Rome, right? I just kind of had to adapt to what everyone else is doing in order to get semi-decent games. I will say that the gameplay felt much more unique. There was a lot more unique features and characteristics. The new CODs kind of all feel very serialized and samey and kind of corporate and sterilized. And this game genuinely tried a lot of new things. Obviously, the biggest of which was the HQ, kind of that social space that you could go into between matches and see other people and watch them open loot boxes and talk to different vendors as opposed to just clicking a button in a menu. There's actual like characters you went and talked to. There was mini games. I think there was social events as well, if I remember correctly. Just a whole lot of stuff that made it feel genuinely different. And I don't think Call of Duty has done anything close to the headquarters system since then. So it was very unique to this game and a very groundbreaking thing that they tried to do. Also, I thought that the loot box system that they implemented was very unique as well. Now, we'll have more on this later down in the video. I'm still not a huge fan of the whole loot box thing, so I wasn't crazy about it, but I will say it was unique and they tried to do it as best they could while still making a little bit more money with it. Obviously, the division system was huge. Now, they've rolled back some of the changes to make it a little more just like a normal Call of Duty game. Fans weren't crazy about how much they mixed up the formula with the original division system at launch, so it does feel not quite as unique anymore, but it's still a really nice feature and a cool way to do perks, I think, overall, with the ribbons and the division system. I also found that the daily challenge system was a breath of fresh air. I know we technically have like little daily challenges, but be honest with me, when's the last time you even paid attention to those? They just give you like 2,500 XP, which is less than a match's worth, and it just kind of, a drop of water in a large pond type thing, and you never think about them. I don't know of anyone that goes in actively every day on Black Ops 6 and tries to complete their dailies. However, since this one was tied into getting weapon variants, getting supply drops, getting armory credits that can be spent on cosmetics and weapon variants, it just felt that much more interesting, and I found myself actually playing the game to complete those tasks. So I would purposely use an LMG if I had an LMG challenge. I would use a certain division in order to get kills with it to get a certain, daily or weekly challenge there. And I remember that was the case back in the day as well. It kind of gave a lot more incentive to play Call of Duty. It gave you kind of those breadcrumbs to chase, right? That path to take instead of just blindly hopping in to shoot the enemy team. So I found that really interesting and unique, and honestly made me miss it from the latest Call of Duty titles. Now, I will say, on top of this whole unique feeling, the game feels super clunky compared to what we're used to with new CODs, especially with how guns kind of feel and handle. Now, I'm not a super fan of the crazy movement system that we've had in recent CODs. You guys have heard me talk about that on the channel before, but I think a game this slow and clunky is possibly not good either. And without the modern weapon handling physics, it just feels really rough to play. It feels like one of those things that didn't age very well. It feels rough to go back and play it after the fact. Now, having said that, whenever I jumped in a year or two ago, whenever they released or they fixed the servers for like classic Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3, those games were even older than this one by a great magnitude, but they didn't feel this bad and dated, to be honest. This is just some weird middle ground where you could tell the engine had evolved a lot from Black Ops 1 and Modern Warfare 2 and stuff, but they purposely nerfed a lot of elements, obviously coming back from the jetpack era. This was the huge boots are back on the ground Call of Duty for them. You could tell that they tried to scale it back so heavily, and it just ended up feeling clunky because of that. They almost overcompensated, I think, in my opinion. I also was kind of very surprised to find out how wild the recoil was in this game. Now, obviously, Modern Warfare 2019 stepped in and kind of totally redid how guns felt and moved and acted and reacted when they were shot, and the recoil was kind of a big sticking point for a lot of people because it was a lot more realistic and punchy. But I honestly have found myself having a lot bigger issues with this version of recoil and missing a lot of shots and losing a lot of gunfights that were just because I couldn't compensate for the recoil the same. Now, it could just be because I'm more used to the modern feeling physics engine, but man, I was kind of surprised how punishing the recoil is, especially since, Modern Warfare 2019, like I said, started that trend of very punishing recoil. Now, next up, and this is the big elephant in the room, as you guys know, my channel kind of can attribute a lot of its success, or if you want to call it that, to skill-based matchmaking, right? Talking about how bad I hated it. And this was a game that did not include, at least in the iteration that we're used to today, skill-based matchmaking, right? A much looser model mainly used to balance teams. And to be honest, this was one of the main reasons I downloaded the game. I wanted to play CoD with players on the servers that didn't have skill-based matchmaking. Once again, I'm not going to tread too much on why I hate skill-based matchmaking, why I think it's terrible for Call of Duty. Check out any of my other videos on this subject matter, but I will say that without it, matches feel so much more organic. I didn't feel like the game was playing me. I didn't feel like I was in this algorithmic just slog all the time trying to play this game. It was nice that I didn't have to brace for impact if I did happen to have a good game, right? I didn't feel like I was going to go 0-20 the next game facing, former COD pro leaguers and stuff like that. So it just felt much more organic and just a normal multiplayer game. I didn't feel like I was, like I said before, playing an algorithm. Now, I'm not too great at this game, and I talked a lot about some of the struggles that I had with it. Obviously, I haven't played this 30 plus hours to get back in the groove or anything, and I'm definitely getting better as I get used to it once again. but I definitely felt that I saw a wider array of skill levels. The game wasn't catering to me, and my skill, as I slowly got used to it and slowly got better at it once again, my KDR steadily rose. It wasn't like up and down every single game as the game tried to pit me with what it felt was a perfect match. I just organically started getting better, started having more positive games, and started getting kill streaks more often as the hours wore on. I played for probably about 4 or 5 hours here over the last couple of days, and it just felt so much more organic. And the other thing that I noticed is lobbies remained. Now, I wasn't able to see for how long or anything like that. I was often doing other things in the menu in between matches, but the game seemed to care much more about the social aspect, right? With the headquarters and stuff like that, lobbies weren't disbanding. I was able to form like a mini rivalry with this one guy I remember for a couple matches in a row, and that's just stuff that you don't get in modern COD games with a skill-based algorithm because it keeps trying to mix up the lobby every time to get you that engagement optimized, lobby that it thinks is going to keep you playing the game for longer. So we've talked about that being a huge sticking point for skill-based matchmaking, that lack of social aspect. It was nice to slowly start to get that back. I do wish people used their mics more, but I'm kind of in a glass house throwing stones because I myself didn't use my mic either. But at the very least, like I said, it seemed to care a lot more about the social aspect of Call of Duty than recent games. I also, without the skill-based matchmaking algorithm, was able to find matches so much quicker. Like, it's not even funny, especially in an 8-year-old game. Now, I know it just got released on Gamepass. There's probably a lot of people playing, but it also wasn't a fan favorite. So it's not like millions and millions and millions of people were clamoring to get back on World War II. And yet I found matches like instantaneously, not within 3 minutes, instantaneously. I was able to boot up the game, scroll over to the find match button, hit that button, and within 10, 15 seconds, I was sitting there aiming a gun. It was incredible. It takes several minutes to find, even at the beginning of like Call of Duty Black Ops 6's life cycle, when there were likely millions and millions of players. It still took several minutes because it's trying to find the perfect puzzle pieces to fit in to make my experience exactly what the algorithm decides it should be. And without all of that entanglements, you find matches instantly. It just looks for the people that are closest to you geographically or ping-wise, and boom, throws you in a game real quick and you're good to go. And that saves so much time. Look on Twitter, look on Reddit, anything like that. You'll find tons of comparisons between games of this era and modern COD games, and the difference is just mind-boggling. I also found, like I was saying before, my KDR is much more consistent and also reflected a lot more when I actually decided to try. If I was just leaning back, talking to my friends, BSing, stuff like that, obviously I wouldn't have a great KDR. The moment I sat up on my chair, maybe started paying attention a little more, thought about what I was doing, tried to hit my shots better, my KDR went up. You could tell organically that, one, I was getting better at the game as I got more used to it after 8 years of not playing it, but also, two, like we talked about in some of my previous SBMM videos, your effort is rewarded, right? If you're not trying that hard, yeah, you might not have great games depending on your skill level, but the more you try, I guarantee the better games you're going to have. I end up having some really good games there towards the end when I was really laser focused. I started getting used to the game, and you just don't get that nowadays because the algorithm just puts you with harder people, and so no matter how hard you try, the algorithm's pretty much going to tell you what kind of a game you're going to have. I also didn't notice any of the strange inconsistencies that we've seen in regards to damage or winning gunfights. Now, I know it's kind of a boogeyman of sorts, right? No one's really confirmed skill-based damage outside of like the bots that they have in Warzone Casual, but it's kind of this thing that's often talked about, often theorized, but never proven. But I didn't notice any of this. The gunfight and fairness ratio and kind of that lag comp and delay and server desync and everything felt identical from the very first second of a match to the very end of that match. It was consistent. I didn't notice that, I started 10-1 and then it almost seemed like the planets realigned themselves to, recuperate those losses, and suddenly I was 12-10. Obviously there was some streaks of deaths and kills here and there, but it felt a lot more consistent. Now, again, I know technically skill-based damage does not exist, so they say, but it was just something that I noticed. It was a lot more consistent. I didn't find myself saying, what the hell, I was melting everyone 5 minutes ago, now I'm not. I never had those kind of thoughts as I played the game. So again, I don't want to, claim that anything's in the game when it's not, but I did have to get that out there. The next thing, and this is massive, this is probably the biggest thing that I noticed, is the feel and setting of the game. I love how unique the game feels from any other COD. We talked about some of the gameplay systems like HQ and the loot boxes and stuff, but the game legitimately stands apart from any other COD game. Even if it's not, your favorite game per se, you can still objectively claim that it feels unique and special compared to a lot of other COD games. And you could tell that the devs genuinely cared and wanted to craft a unique experience for you. And that's kind of the complete opposite of recent COD titles, especially the COD titles that are all just bundled together in the COD HQ nowadays. And to go along with that, the game actually feels tonally different in terms of setting and everything than CODs around it or other CODs of its era. The in-game menu music immediately kind of evokes that World War II kind of epic war classic feeling, right? It feels a lot more serious than recent CODs. It takes itself a little more seriously. Not always, obviously some of the cosmetics and the weapon charms and stuff are a little bit goofy, but for the most part, it feels a lot more serious and gritty and adult. It doesn't feel like it was made for a 10-year-old on G Fuel. It legitimately feels like an M-rated World War II shooter with all the gravitas that comes with that. And it didn't try to appeal to anything outside of its time frame or universe. They didn't try cramming in any of the annoying, cross promotions. They just, they had a theme, they stuck to it, and that was it. And from the moment you boot up the game, you instantly know you're playing a different game to the one before and the one after it. And we talked about that kind of missing in recent Call of Duty games. It still comes out every year, but it feels even more samey. Back in the day, each and every year tried to make itself a little more different than the year before it. For example, the year before this, we had robots in space with the Infinite Warfare. And then the year after this, we went back to kind of the near future with Black Ops 4. And you had, the different like operator kill streaks and different things like that. So they felt a lot different, right? You had this World War II setting, grounded and gritty and realistic in the middle of those two a little more futuristic games. And it just makes it feel a little more worth it to buy a Call of Duty game every year if you know it's going to offer you a different experience for the most part than the COD the year before. At the end of the day, they're all Call of Duty, so there's going to be a lot shared year to year. But if you play this game, you'll know it definitely feels a lot different than the game that came before and after it, even if the bones are still Call of Duty. It also sticks to a very consistent theme, right? Nothing in here is jarring or seems to stick out like a sore thumb or is a weird inclusion that you didn't think should be in the game. For the most part, everything sticks to a solid, unified vision that the devs seem to have for this game at the beginning, which again, completely lacking in Call of Duty now, no matter what age or, what era it's in. Within 1 month, we have like The Rock shooting Hulk Hogan, shooting a cartoon version of a shark. No matter what the setting is, you're going to have that 1 or 2 months in, and it's just nauseating. But it stuck to a consistent theme. So it's not always the most realistic World War II game, but it's at least a consistent theme and close enough to being authentic to make it, worth it. It also goes out of its way, once again, to stick to its time period, which we talked about. My first video on this channel, once I revived this channel, was talking that Call of Duty Vanguard did not do this, and it just lost its identity because of it. There's no Nicki Minaj, there's no Godzilla, nothing like that. You don't play with operators, you play with generic character models, but they are inspired by the actual uniforms and regiments, and that there's two sides fighting this war, like the Allies and the Axis. The Axis players all speak in German and everything like that. The Allies speak in English, or I think it's all English for the most part for the Allies, but you can tell there's a difference. There's actual theme and setting behind this. The maps feel straight out of World War II. There's no crazy tie-in maps where you're suddenly playing in a spaceship or something, and they feel like they're from another time and place to the world we live in today, and that just felt so fun to go back through and experience. And to tie in with that as well, even the menus and the UI feels a little more faithful to the period. It's a little more older, a little more aged, kind of that mid-20th century feel to it. And obviously, like we called out earlier in the video, there's a much more gritty and more serious tone that accompanies the game. It doesn't take itself 100,000% seriously, but for the most part, it is much more gritty and serious. And weapons, while they were highly modified sometimes, in terms of some of the variants might look a little goofy and some of the attachments are anachronistic, they're still somewhat believable. You could tell that they still tried to make it, even if it was like a fantasy 1940, some of the weapon variants. For the most part, I would say 85 to 90% of them seem somewhat believable within the context of, again, mid 20th century World War II era. And, the character models, once again, they're all period correct models. A lot of it is history driven, the various regiments and squadrons that were in World War II, even some of the lesser known ones. So that's awesome, and it adds to the immersion much more. There's also a much bigger connection to history just, throughout the entire game. You feel like the devs cared about history and they wanted to showcase a lot of it in the game. Now, finally, I couldn't have this video without talking and comparing and contrasting the World War II loot box system to kind of the current, battle pass slash, storefront system that we have today. Now, playing this for the last couple of days, I did find that it did feel rewarding to earn loot boxes and to complete those challenges to get the loot boxes. It was fun to do the pack pulls, right? I'm a huge Pokemon TCG, collector, so I love ripping pack pulls, right? Seeing if I got the rare card at the end of the pack, stuff like that. And this kind of gave me that same dopamine rush. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. This was fun. But at the end of the day, I still felt terrible that I had a bunch of weapons that were not unlocked for me to use in my created class screen just simply because I didn't get lucky enough to pull them out of a loot box yet. And I think that is one of the most egregious errors that this game made. I still think it's one of, if not the most fair loot box system we had in Call of Duty, but in my opinion, it is still, as a whole, worse than our current system for a few reasons. And I know moving the cosmetics to a bundle storefront type of thing opened a massive can of worms and, in my opinion, kind of doomed Call of Duty now that they're going the Fortnite route. I will say that if they had done the Battle Pass system more consumer friendly and more correctly, in my mind, it would be leagues better than even this loot box system. But of course, it's Call of Duty's Activision. They're greedy. So they just kind of, we gave them an inch, they took a mile type thing, and they kind of ruined it. So in theory, our current system could be much, much better than it is and could have widened the gap between the loot box system and what we have now in terms of which one is more consumer friendly. But I think at the end of the day, not being able to use weapons that were added to the game that may or may not be better or higher up in the meta than the guns that you have unlocked is just unforgivable, right? You can't lock them behind these loot box systems. And I know there's a bunch of ways to maybe get them, and that's why I said this is the most fair loot box system. But again, it's the most fair, unfair system, if that makes sense, right? It's still a loot box system. I'm not a fan of that. If it had just been cosmetics, maybe it could be better. But I think at the end of the day, all things considered, I think I'd still rather have what we have today. Obviously, the goofy characters and the overpriced bundles notwithstanding. But I think for, minute-to-minute gameplay, that system impacts me a lot less than not having weapons because of a loot box system or having to grind or pay for the chance to maybe gamble and open up a cool thing or just get a bunch of stickers that you already have type deal. So yeah, all in all, I'm not of the camp that thinks we need to go back to loot box. I know guys like Nero Cinema and stuff have said that. I'm not of that opinion, but I did find this loot box system leagues more fair than some of the other iterations we've seen in Call of Duty. So that about wraps it up, guys. Overall, I can't say I super enjoyed my time with this game. I know I was never a huge fan of Call of Duty World War II. It was never my favorite game. I think I'm only second or third prestige, only 2 or 3 days of gameplay in this. It came out during my senior year of college, so that had a lot to do with it. I had a lot of other stuff to take care of. I didn't have that much time to play it. But also, it just didn't really grab me the way that a lot of other Call of Duties did. So going back and playing through it, it was fun. It definitely had its merits. It's fun to play a unique Call of Duty experience that feels unlike what we've had for the last 7-8 years. But yeah, at the end of the day, I don't know how much longer I'll be playing. I'm not a huge fan. You know, feels clunky, feels just, I don't know. I kind of want to go back to a lot of the quality of life updates that we've had since then. And yeah, at the end of the day, I might keep this around the hard drive for a little bit longer. Enjoy the lack of skill-based matchmaking algorithm for a while, but I'll probably just play another old Call of Duty if I want to get my fix on fair lobbies and stuff like that in the future. So I'm done rambling now. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Did you download it from Game Pass? Did you enjoy the game back in the day when it first came out? And are you planning on downloading it or playing it here, as it is now free for all of you that have Game Pass? So that about wraps it up, guys. Once again, if you've enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. And yeah, stay subscribed so you guys can get all the latest Black Ops 6 and Black Ops 7 content here on the channel. Till the next time, guys, have a good one.